I'm back. I was just watching Evac ramasamy. I like that guy mostly. Um, then he got a very good question about Israel right now and what's going on. See, he spews out of one side of his mouth. He's saying we got to get rid of these. Uh, what do you call them? These groups of billionaires that back the politician puppets. And he's saying it's better to have a billionaire who's backing himself than it is to have right now in order to rebuild the system than it is to have um, someone who's backed by the same group of billionaires that have been backing us forever. And then he says we have to defend those billionaires in the same breath. The very next question. So he says we got to get away from these billionaires. We got to defend our country from these billionaires. Let's send our military to defend these billionaires from people trying to defend themselves and their country against these billionaires. Doesn't make any fucking sense to me. You're just talking in circles. Do you know who Klaus Schwab's boss is? The Rothschilds. Do you know who's Israel boss? Who owns Israel? Who signed the Balfour Agreement? It's the Rothschilds. So when Buddy compared, and it was a good analogy, I thought, when he compared Israel's leader to Hitler, I think that's pretty accurate. Except that Hitler was painted in the same light that Donald Trump's painted, or Muammar Gaddafi. So, it's so frustrating. Who's the real fucking terrorist here? So, he's just exact same as Donald Trump. There's no fucking difference. It's the same shit. He's gonna just take us right into this fucking war and continue this war in the Middle East and continue to support it. Even though Israel, the people, are in America and Canada and South America, like all of them, and then the two tribes of Joseph and Benjamin, I believe it is, the southern tribes, are here about 80 to 90%. There's, I believe there's still like 3 or 4 little groups that have proved their bloodline to Israel that are still in Africa, or were still in Africa. One of them was being persecuted by the Africans still, because the Africans hate the Israelites. Obviously, the Israelites got pushed back down into Egypt, or not the Israelites, I'm sorry, the two tribes of Jacob, got pushed down into Egypt, and the 10 tribes got pushed up as Khazars came in from the west, right? No, from the east, and they came into the west. And they split the two groups. They were already split. They weren't getting along. The 10 tribes were getting further and further from Jesus, I believe. Yeah, because they had a fight about leadership, and then they split up, and but the Israelites still had to go back every 7 years to the temple and worship or whatever. So the Israel leaders made another temple, and they put in some idols and stuff, and got their people to worship those instead, so that they didn't have to leave, because he didn't want them going to Israel and becoming part of Israel, or going back to Israel and becoming part of the other tribes or whatever. I can't remember what the fight was about. I think it was just over who the king was or whatever, and there was some political shit, just bureaucratics. Anyway, so then the Khazars came in because neither tribe was under God anymore. The southern tribes started to fall away and worship idols as well. So God sent Satan in the form of Esau, and that split them into the diaspora, the last diaspora, and we lost the 10 tribes somehow, and then we the two tribes. It's written that they left black and came back white. So, and then in 1945, those same white Jews, which are Edom, they were probably all really similar in melanin at one time, but like when the seasons change, you get more sun. Bunny rabbits go brown for the summer, and then in the winter we get less sun, and our bunny rabbits go white. Every year, all bunny rabbits do that. It's just about how much sun you get over time, and so few generations, and excuse me, few generations, and then one tribe would get darker because they're northern, and one tribe and the other tribes are southern, and then and that would have been subtle differences, but then one tribe or 10 tribes went north where they would have picked up slaves and things, and got picked up as slaves and things, which is why there's still some of them left here and there, and then but kept getting pushed out every time they tried to settle. That's the definition of the word diaspora. Every time they tried to settle, they somebody'd come in and war at them, or a bunch of groups would come in and push them again and push them again and push them again. But God always makes your negative out for your positive. Just can take generations, right? 1,000 years is like a day to him. So a couple generations is nothing to God. That's no time. A few hours to him. As opposed to us, it could be, well, it's generations. You're looking at 100 years, 200 years. Anyway, so they got pushed around and warred and this and that, but kept picking up traits as they moved. And even if they didn't, the 10 tribes say they didn't pick up any traits. They just kept getting pushed, and got to Japan and got pushed again. And I presume, quite safely presume, that the Japanese and Chinese and Asians were already coming over to America and settling a little bit, becoming what we would call Eskimos, and probably made it all the way down, or most of the way down to South America, towards South, right? Following herds and weather. So, and then finding beautiful land and everything, and just saying, well, we'll just stay here. There wasn't as much land, though. It was mostly lakes over here. And then, so Israel came over, got pushed over here, and then, which is what God wanted. That was his plan, to protect them. And at the same time, he had to protect a lot of animals. You know, So he with most of America being lakes, there would have been you would have been able to walk to all the little islands. Not Hawaii so much, but you could walk to the Galapagos and to Australia. Um, so all those animals would have had time, generations, to have gotten that far out as well by the time the Israelites got over here. And he let the lakes go, which is the remainders of the floodwaters, and that would have raised the ocean levels enough to bury all those walking trails that we clearly see, and preserve them under the ocean for us to find, but also exposed vast amount of land over here in order for the Israelites to thrive and make. I presume they probably had pretty nice stuff here, right? When you look at like the Mayan temples and stuff like that, they probably and the buildings and everything that's here. Um, I would think that they probably had some stuff, but not a lot, and not all of them. There was the tribes that we kept alive, that that we would have that weren't living like Israelites at all. So there was no problem. Well, mostly, except that we wanted the land now that we found it. Um, and then in that explanation, you can also bury your lost city of Atlantis. Pretty simple. It makes all perfect sense, right? Um, so we can't definitively say that that's true, but we can, in a court of law, you could prove it beyond a reasonable doubt that that's the Israelites, and that Japan was already over here. So then they would have started to interbreed, I guess is what you call it, and that's why Native Americans look like a cross between a kind of a Hebrew or like a Eastern person, Israeli, like an Eastern kind of complexion, but then they have all these Japanese traits as well. They got the prettier eyes, the dark straight hair, a lot of the same traits, and so we can say that okay, then the Japanese and Chinese, they were probably already over here. They're incredibly beautiful, so the Israelites would have been taken wives, 100%. And then and slaves and all that other shit, because they're little, right? So it's easy to do whatever. And the Israelites are big, and natives are big, and they're crazy. So, but then throughout, over whatever it was that they were here, I don't know the exact timeline, but from it was after Christ that the diaspora happened, and then so that and then we got to Columbus. So it was in that time frame that they would have been run out and then protected and held. And I believe Columbus didn't all that shit we're told about sailing and all that, the Earth's a curve, and that's what he saw. That's all bullshit. He's seen the ocean rise. That's what they saw. And they said, what the fuck? Something just happened major. I'm going to go sail and see. There must be land. If this much water just came up in the ocean, then it exposed something. I got to go see what. And then he got funding. Easy. And then that history just got changed in order to fit the narrative of the ball Earth. So we're taught differently. But evidence says otherwise. But anyhow, so when Evac talks about supporting Israel and stuff, it's just because he has absolutely no understanding who Israel is, and it's unbelievably obvious that the same super PACs that you talk about are funded and controlled by the same people that control Israel, and they all answer to the one family who signed the Balfour Agreement. I don't know. It's all so obvious that I have trouble believing you can't see it. It's been Israelites who've run the Federal Reserve since its starting, since its beginnings. And see, there was the first national bank, the second national bank, and then instead of making the third national bank, they called it the Federal Reserve. And there was a meeting about that. I should know the name of the meeting too, and you could look it up. But they decided that if they called it Federal Reserve, the people would feel like it's a part of their government, even though it's a private bank. And Evac knows this. So how can he not know that it's Israel, right? And then I was telling you about Muammar Gaddafi. I mentioned his name, and I mentioned Donald Trump's name, and I mentioned Hitler's name. And all three of them have very similar backstories in that they were misinterpreted, misrepresented by the press and by history. Now, I've theorized that a bunch of the Edomites that call themselves Israelites knew they were Edomites before Hitler. And so during the Hitler thing, they kind of used him as an excuse to kill a bunch of their own indirectly or what have you, and made sure, and like Klaus Schwab went around and made sure that you caught the Jews that were hiding, and it was specific Jews that had specific information that they hunted down and killed. It wasn't all of them, and it wasn't 6 million of them. There wasn't 6 million of them, and there's still a bunch of them alive today. So you're being lied to. The racist thing about him hating black people, he told us that the black people were the Israelites, they're the chosen people of God. How can my men expect to compete against them? That's what he said about Jesse Owens. He didn't say he's an animal. He said he has the gifts of animals because he's the chosen people of God. But they couldn't have him say that, so they tell you something else. It makes me wonder about Putin. When you look at his policies and what he's doing for his people, it seems like he's actually a decent leader who's been pushed in order to fit this narrative. Though he does go to the Davos meetings and stuff and hangs out with all the other politicians and gets funded by the same billionaires, so it only stands to reason that he's an actor. And then when you look at Zelensky, he was an actor. He was a stand-up comedian. Failed, and he was like a backup dancer or some shit. Like a, I don't even know. It looked like a leather fetish videos and stuff. A real sick pervert who would do pretty much anything to get his perverted kicks off. So easy to manipulate, easy to handle, put him in power and handle him. I'm sure he's got handlers that know exactly what to get him, who, and tape him and keep tabs on him and make sure that he does all the right moves and he's just a fucking actor, just some guy who's been offered this gig and doesn't give a fuck about humanity, whatever he thinks. I don't know his spiritual beliefs. He would think that he'd have to be an atheist and think that, you know, people evolved from bugs in order to act the way that he does. But he could be a Satanist just as easily. And I don't understand Satanism, how you could know that there's a God and then deny it and worship the opposite or whatever. It's like the flat earthers who don't do the Bible. I think that's weird. I could see you saying, okay, the flat earth doesn't definitively prove the Bible by itself, but between the prophecies and the miracles and the everyday miracles that we still see that book in the name of Christ perform in people's lives and stuff when they go through their hardest times. Even though like a lot of people will go to them to get through their hardest time and then abandon them, it's still where you go. And so I think all of that combined helps to prove the Bible. And then also it's the only book that's ever been written by that many writers over that many years, right? And then gotten all the prophecies correct over and over again. So it just, I guess, already knowing, you know, how carbon dating works and things of this nature really helped me believe in the Bible in the first place. And then knowing that the earth is flat, on top of all that. So I guess that's maybe where those people are lacking, is that they don't understand what they're looking at, geology, biology, and well, cosmology they do, but when it comes to things like geology, they base all their math, like when you carbon date or radiometric date or whatever, anything, you got to go to the geologic time scale, find something that radio dates the same or carbon dates the same, and then you can know what era they were from, and know from that you can extrapolate how old it was through mathematical equation of knowing generally that every era is around 10,000 years, or so, to 10 or 20. None of their numbers are that precise, but they always need to go back to the geologic time scale in order to get their base numbers. That's where they get the original numbers from. And now it was arbitrarily made up in like 18 something, way back. And it might even been before that. But it was a long, long time ago, way before we've dug too much into the earth or anything. It had never been found at the time, never been discovered. And to this day, it's never been discovered in its proper order. So right there, you know that it doesn't exist. We there would be a chance that we could find it different here or there due to local catastrophe, flooding, whatever. But for the most part, it should be in its correct order everywhere on Earth if it's millions and billions of years. And the way they describe it, it would have to be, unless there was something that happened in that Pacific area, which is what they always say. Oh, well, there must have been something. Well, there must have been something everywhere because you've never found it, you fucking morons. And then even once you do have it, I mean, you don't, but even once you pretend to have it, the logic of it is that you age the rocks by which fossils are found in the layer of rock, and then you age the fossils by which layer of rock they're found in. So it's circular reasoning. It makes absolutely no sense. You can't age the fossils by the rocks and then turn around and age the rocks by the fossils. You gotta know the age of one or the other, right? And if I took a limestone from the Paleontonic era and then took another limestone from a different era, they wouldn't be able to tell me the difference in them through any scientific process, except if I told them how far down into the earth I dug. And then they could lie to you and tell you that oh, well, it must have been this. If it's that deep, it was this era in time. Well, that doesn't make sense either, because we find other things at that depth that you say are a different era of time. So the depth doesn't matter, the rocks don't matter, and the fossils don't matter. Nothing ages anything. So you don't have any science. Nothing. Just believe us because. And all the sciences are like that, not just geology. Geology is just the one that I happen to have the most knowledge about and passion for. But you can do biology just as easily, right? We've been breeding horses for the Kentucky Derby to make the fastest horse ever, but we're never going to get a cheetah. It's never going to happen. You can breed horses and horses and horses and horses and zebras and fuck moose. I don't care. If you think that they can breed, I doubt it, but maybe, because they're very similar. But and I don't think a moose, but a zebra for sure, and a moose you could probably breed that with your cattle and get some weird animal like you do with buffaloes. But but you can tell they're really similar. Like they're almost the same kind of animal. They're just evolved differently, or I hate that word, adapted differently to their surroundings, and the differences are subtle. Like I said, you're never going to get a cheetah. And even if you brought in a cheetah and took its sperm and injected it into a horse, you're not going to get anything. Maybe a sick horse, right? But it's not going to get pregnant. God took that away, that ability. The angels could do that. The fallen angels could take any form, and their sperm would be of that form. and then they could technically create what they called Nephilim. Um, so, but that was annulled after the flood. That ability was taken away from, well, mostly taken away from them. I think that there's still Nephilim in the world, so they're still doing it. But my thoughts is that they can only do it under certain conditions, and what it is they have to change the frequency of the earth in order to line up with them better and with the people better, or whatever it is that they're breeding with, in order to make their to take the form, to take solid form. I have no idea though, but that's just a guess. Um, so 5G is going to give them solid form wherever they want to be. All these towers they keep putting up, or they're holographic towers, one of the two. Holographic projection towers. Anyhow, the I gotta go because I'm out of time. That's what was my next thought. So Evac, ramasamy, I don't think you really know history, and you don't understand the world that you live in as well as you think. You're looking at this layer, but the power is at this layer, and you're missing it all together. So wake up, buddy. Anyways, guys and gals, I don't think Trump's any better, so there's no choice. That's a good choice. Because they're all terrorists. And that's my final thought today. Have a great day, guys. God bless you. Like, subscribe, and whatever. Mostly pray for me. Pray for the world. Pray for, and convince your own brain that there is a good future, because there is one. Like, I didn't describe it today, but it's there. There is a true happy end to this. There's several of them that we could work out happy endings, right? We only need 13 people to change the world. That's all Jesus needed. That's all that Joseph Joseph and his sons. There was only 13 of them. So even in the legend of Hercules and Jason and the Argonauts, there was 13 of them. Hercules went off and did his own thing because he was like the Jesus or like the Joseph, but then the other 12 did the other half of the mission,